Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're grabbing a magnifying glass and zooming right in on the Salem witch trials. We're going to strip away all that centuries-old folklore to separate the hard facts from the towering myths. You know, it's so incredibly easy to just look at this historical event through the lens of a cheesy ghost story or some spooky Halloween special. But the reality of what actually went down in this small colonial town is a fascinating, wildly complex, and deeply tragic piece of American history. We're going to dive straight into the socio-political climate of 1692 Massachusetts and figure out exactly how a whole village suddenly turned on itself, literally sending innocent people to the gallows. Section 1. The Nightmare Begins. To really wrap our heads around this event, you've got to put yourself right smack in the middle of the panic. Seriously, imagine waking up one morning to find your neighbors whispering your name. Let's just pause and let that sink in for a second. In a tight-knit 17th century Puritan community, your reputation was absolutely everything. We're not talking about strangers making these claims from a couple of towns over. No, these are the folks you trade with, the people you sit right next to in the meeting house, the faces you see every single day. That sudden, terrifying onset of paranoia coming from your trusted friends, that is the psychological foundation of this entire tragedy. When the social fabric of a frontier town that's just trying to survive completely unravels, the chaos is just absolute.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the speed of this escalation is truly horrifying. Picture this. In the morning, it's just neighbors gossiping over a fence, but by sunset, those little whispers have transformed into formal complaints brought straight to the local magistrates. And by the end of the week, you are officially standing in a courtroom, accused of serving the devil. It was an absolute avalanche of panic, moving so incredibly fast that the accused almost never had time to mount any kind of defense. You have to remember, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony of 1692, the legal system wasn't designed to protect the accused. Actually, scratch that, it was fundamentally designed to root out sin. The second a formal warrant was issued, the presumption of guilt was heavily stacked against you. It was a blink of an eye journey from a quiet rumor to a literal life or death trial.
Section 2. A court without evidence. Okay, let's dive into this. This is where the sheer, absolute helplessness of the situation really grabs hold of you. The logical safety nets and, the due process we completely take for granted in modern law, they simply did not exist back in 1692. First off, no physical evidence is required. Zero. There's nothing tangible for a judge to even look at. Second, there are no actual eyewitnesses to a real-world crime. Instead, these Salem courts relied on this terrifying legal concept known as spectral evidence. This basically meant an accuser could just claim your spirit, your specter, appeared to them in a dream to torment them. And the court, they would accept that as valid, undeniable proof of witchcraft. Seriously, how do you even begin to prove your innocence against an invisible crime that someone else supposedly saw inside their own mind? The terrifying answer is, you can't.
Section 3. True American History. So let's pivot away from the personal nightmare for a moment and look at the macro reality of what this event actually was. We so often categorize Salem as, a fictional horror movie, a pop culture caricature full of cackling witches on broomsticks and bubbling cauldrons. But we absolutely have to separate that folklore from true American history. This was a very real, incredibly dark event that happened to real human beings. We're talking about farmers, tavern owners, enslaved individuals, societal outcasts, people who were systematically stripped of their rights and executed by their own government. Grounding this event in reality is absolutely crucial, because treating it like a campfire story, that does a massive disservice to the actual victims and the very real historical lessons their deaths left behind.
Section 4. The 330-year debate.
Because this is real history, it effectively functions as this centuries-old cold case. What's really interesting about this slide is that for more than 330 years, historians have debated and desperately searched for the true motive behind this mass panic. Think about the incredible weight of that number for a second. 3.5 centuries. That's over 300 years of continuous research, analyzing ancient court transcripts, and agonizing over how an entire community could so completely fracture. The Salem witch trials remain one of the most heavily studied events in colonial American history, precisely because the root cause isn't just one simple, easy thing. It's like a giant, complex psychological and sociological puzzle that scholars are still trying to piece together today.
So, historians generally point to 4 primary motives that fueled this whole crisis. First up, the supernatural. Were there genuine supernatural elements or maybe some localized folk magic at play that sparked the initial fears among those young girls? Second, mass hysteria. Was this an uncontrollable, snowballing psychological panic brought on by the trauma of recent Native American wars and a notoriously brutal frontier winter? Third, political revenge. Were powerful local families, like the Putnams and the Porters, simply using all this chaos to settle some bitter land disputes and literally eliminate their rivals under the guise of justice? Or fourth, religious fear. Was this driven entirely by an extremist, puritanical theology where literally every illness and crop failure was viewed as the direct, undeniable work of Satan? The general consensus today is that Salem wasn't caused by just one of these factors. Rather, it was an incredibly toxic combination of all of them, just converging at the exact wrong time.
Section 5. Uncovering the truth.
This brings us to our core objective for this explainer. We really have to navigate through those competing theories and separate the fact from the myth to uncover the terrifying truth. So the crucial point is, understanding this dark chapter is far more than just, memorizing colonial history. It actively shapes our modern understanding of justice, the fundamental importance of the presumption of innocence, and honestly, the extreme fragility of a community under stress. It shows us the devastating power of fear. It shows us how quickly institutional systems can be weaponized against vulnerable people when sheer panic overrides basic reason. Which leaves us staring at a final, lingering question. Was it hysteria, revenge, fear, or a wildly complicated mix of all three? I really want you to keep that question in the back of your mind as you look back at Salem, and honestly, as you observe modern panics in our own society today. Because the real answers to what actually happened in 1692 are undeniably more fascinating and more terrifying than the myths. Thank you for diving into this explainer with me. Keep digging, keep exploring, and never, ever stop questioning the history you think you know.